This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Real quick, up top, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. Also, on our Facebook, you'll find a subgroup, a little forum called Citizens of the Milky Way. That's where daily we like to interact with our listeners. People can post memes and articles.
Yeah.
And we just chat about the spooky stuff or just anything. And anyone is welcome to join that. Just find it, click that button, and one of us will let you in. Also, if once a week is not enough, and let's face it, folks, it isn't.
It isn't, and that's okay. It's okay to know that about yourself.
It isn't. So, therefore, you can go to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast where you can get all sorts of goodies. There's a little something for everybody. So please go check that out. Of course, like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones.
We so appreciate all of the love and support that you give us.
Absolutely.
And whenever we see a like or a rate, a subscribe, a review, any of those things, it just makes our hearts freaking flutter.
It sure does.
And we just appreciate it. And we love you guys. Thank you so much.
Now, it is time to sort of
switch gears here.
And we want to give you just a little something up top.
Yeah.
Today's episode, obviously, if you listen to Creep Street, you like the weird, you like the macabre, you like the bizarre. Today, we are talking about it's probably, by far, I would say, the most brutal, nasty stories we're going to be covering.
This is rated R.
This is real shit. And in all seriousness, if you're squeamish, just buckle up.
Yeah.
Who we are talking about today is truly, if violence and just evil.
Yeah.
He was
just
evil
personified. Yes.
So just a word of warning, this episode is very brutal.
Yeah. And I'll give you a heads up before I say any of those things. So don't feel like you have to turn off the episode. Just know that there might be a couple times where you're going to fast forward 20 seconds or so. And that's okay.
Well, Maureen, we've teased him enough. What are we talking about?
We've been toozing and teasing, and I think it's time to give them the reason that they're listening.
Yes.
Today we are talking about the Gainesville Ripper.
Maureen, let us hear those sources.
Yes, here we go.
Because I know you got a lot of them.
Our sources for this week, one is an episode of 2020 called The Devil in Gainesville. Then an article called Danny Rowling, The True Story Behind the Killer Who Inspired Scream by Tim Ott, and that's on biography.com. And then we have the book The Gainesville Ripper by Mary Rysick.
This, I just want to first off applaud Mo for her research.
Thank you.
Researching this kind of stuff can be difficult.
A lot.
And I know it really did. It wasn't a pleasant experience for Maureen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, and I'm sure everyone here listening can kind of understand this or kind of feel what I'm talking about, where it's like we're so interested in this stuff and we want to know this information, but sometimes it can just be hard.
Yeah.
It can be intense. But that's kind of part of it, because you want to hear these people's stories. You want to know what really happened.
Right.
But I got to tell you his name, so I'm going to say it now.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. So his name is Danny Rowling. Now, Daniel Harold Rowling was born on May 26th, 1954 in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay.
Now, another weird little coincidence, synchronicity, I don't know, when I was researching this episode, I didn't know that's where he was born.
Yeah.
And I was on a plane to Shreveport, Louisiana.
Yeah. How wild is that? Mo was doing a show down in Shreveport, and she was there and texted me because she was doing some research while she was at her hotel and was like, oh my God, this son of a bitch was born here.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, that was something I didn't know either.
Danny Rowling had a rough go of it, just growing up in general, as many serial killers do. And I'm not saying that to try to make anyone feel bad for these people or to excuse what they did or anything like that. It's just the truth. And so that's why we're talking about it.
Right.
He actually sustained a head injury as he was being born, as he was exiting the birth canal. Something that they did back then, they had like pliers, basically, or not pliers, like clamps. I don't really know what was going on. That could be an episode of its own, I think. But it like clamped hard on his head or something like that when he was coming out. So he sustained a head injury right away.
Yeah. It's like one of those machines where you put a quarter in and you want to get that stuffed animal.
Yes.
But it never quite grips it.
Mm-hmm. It's the claw.
It's the claw.
Yeah. Which is, you really hate to see that coming towards your vagina.
Yeah.
To be frank about it.
Yeah, that's right.
But honestly, that wasn't even the first time he sustained an injury. Unfortunately, Danny's father, James, was abusive right from the start.
He was a piece of shit. Huge piece of shit.
Huge piece of shit. His mother, Claudia, was 19 years old when she got pregnant with Danny, and Danny's father, James, really didn't want a kid. He was not financially ready for it. He wasn't ready for it at all. I don't know if he ever wanted to have kids. I don't know.
Were they married?
Yes, they were married. And so Claudia becomes pregnant because I'm assuming they're having sex without using any protection, and for some reason, James was surprised that they conceived a child. I don't really know how that fucking works. But he was upset to hear that, and he would batter and beat his wife while she was pregnant with Danny.
It's like, how do you think babies are made, you fucking moron?
Exactly. It's like, why?
Think it's a stork, you piece of shit?
Like, why are you shocked and so angry? Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Like, I don't understand. Like, that's one of those things that, like, just actually does not compute in my head. That ass hat. So right from the start, Danny sustained some pretty serious injuries. Now, when Danny was a young child, his father became a police officer, and once that happened, things only got worse.
Right.
Danny had a younger brother named Kevin who was born, and it seems like Kevin maybe did not experience as much abuse as his brother Danny did. However, Kevin did say that there's like big chunks of time that he just does not remember from his childhood, which is a sign of some major trauma that happened. So it's possible he was abused just as much as Danny was, and he just doesn't recall. But anyway, this house was absolutely chaotic. So Danny would be beat by his father or verbally abused as well by his father for really anything that he was doing wrong. Even as an infant, like apparently he crawled in kind of an unusual way as a baby.
Really?
And his dad, for some reason, just really hated seeing that and would actually, like, he tossed him down a hallway because he was like so angry with this infant for crawling, like not the way that James wanted him to be crawling. And so Danny, growing up in this environment, as oftentimes these things kind of happen, he actually kind of took the side of his dad kind of as a defense mechanism and confused attention with love. Because when he was getting beat by his dad, he was at least getting attention from his dad, and he wasn't really experiencing love in really any other ways, really. It seems like his mom tried her best, however, she was going through a lot as well, and she was being beat as well.
Absolutely.
He sustained another head injury that dented his forehead at age 5. He was molested by a family member at age 9.
Dear God.
And at age 11, he had to physically restrain his mother from slitting her own wrists.
Dear God.
So this boy had really seen a lot.
Quite a childhood. Wasn't a fucking Pixar movie.
No, not at all. And it was bad enough that his school counselors said he was suffering from an inferiority complex with aggressive tendencies and poor impulse control. And then he picked up a hobby that usually would be great for kids and would be a great way to express your emotions. He started to be interested in music.
Okay.
He got a guitar, he started playing guitar, started singing these hymns and things like that, and started having, big ass hopes for his future in terms of music. And I say usually that's great because usually it is great, but for this motherfucker, he was just extremely obnoxious and was not really, he's a serial killer. Okay?
Right.
You understand.
And obviously he's pure evil and whatnot. All that aside, he's also just fucking obnoxious.
So yeah, he's just so weird and needy and always apologizing but not actually being sorry. At this point he is a child, but as he gets older, he still has the brain of a child.
Yeah.
It's really, really crazy the way that his mind works and the way he thinks, how he can kind of work things in his head for things to make sense to him.
Right.
Just like a child.
Absolutely wacky.
However, with the music, he also started to dabble with drugs and alcohol at this time, which of course did not really help situations. And then this was also when he started to have these dark, sadistic, sexual fantasies. None of this is shocking. You know what I mean? You're hearing about all of these terrible things that have happened to him or have happened around his life. It only makes sense that this was going to happen.
Right.
And also, I think some serious mental illness issues ran in the family anyway. Separately
clearly.
From this.
When you don't beat your family if you're of solid mental mental capacity.
Especially for the reasons that he is. I mean, there's never a good reason, obviously.
Right.
But a baby is crawling different. What are you even talking about?
Yeah.
Not only did he start having these dark sexual fantasies, he actually started peeping on girls and women in the area.
Okay.
Oftentimes he would be caught, the police were called, and it was another very, very embarrassing moment for him and his father, the police officer.
And it's hard to explain. If the phrase "aw shucks" were a person, Danny Rowling he constantly, in the videos, he almost has this "oh shucks."
He does, he acts as if he's "Oh brother, I can't believe I did this again.
I went and did it again, Sheriff.
And so he's talking as if he ate too many brownies.
Yeah, he sounds like someone who would go to prison in Andy Griffith. They're just falling asleep in the blueberry patch or something, getting drunk and falling asleep. He sounds like something out of fucking Andy Griffith.
It's true. That's how he behaves and that's how he thinks. He thinks that after the fact, if he says sorry about it, that completely clears his name of any kind of guilt or responsibility at all for what he has done. Now, as Danny got a little bit older, he enlisted in the Air Force. Apparently, he tried to join the Navy, but they wouldn't take him. So he decided to go with the Air Force, but he wasn't there long. He basically barely got through boot camp. Yeah. And then he was kicked out. He was dishonorably discharged for getting wasted and doing drugs on base and crashing of some kind of vehicle.
Right.
And I think he did 30 days in military jail before he was dishonorably discharged.
Just a fucking idiot.
Literally like a child. He has these impulses. This man is so impulsive, and you're going to see that over and over again. He isn't like some other killers where they're very meticulous and everything is planned out, things like that. There is a little bit of premeditation, but this is a very impulsive person.
Oh, yeah.
And you will see that as we go on further as well. So he finally returns back to Shreveport, Louisiana, and he moves back home. And he, of course, continues to be receiving all of this verbal and physical abuse from his father, even though he's back and he's, grown.
So what is he, probably late 19, 20, 21,
something like that? Yeah.
Okay, so young man, very young man.
Young man, and he cannot keep a job for his fucking life.
Right.
He's just a screw up, and he cannot do anything right. So he grew up in the church, and he continued to go to church, to a Pentecostal church near where he lived. And I'm not really sure personally if he went there just because he was a believer, or if he also was there as kind of a way to blend in.
Right.
I think it was a little bit of both, maybe, because he does seem to genuinely believe, he asks people to pray for him and apologizes to God God and says he prays for his soul and things like that. So
Right.
I don't really know if that's all an act.
Right.
Or not. I think it kind of is true, but he
well-
just doesn't like understand what that even really it means.
And I think there's a reason he was drawn to that specific sect of Christianity. It's not, as someone who's very familiar with the Pentecostal religion, someone with eccentricities would fit in better there than, say, just like at a, your average Catholic church.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I don't mean like eccentric, like there's eccentric people everywhere.
Right.
I just mean it's a louder experience.
Yeah.
Someone would probably fit in a little better. You know what I mean? Than like a more quiet, tame.
Yes.
Absolutely. Sitting in the pew.
And it's like very social.
Yes. Yes.
Being around people a lot, things like that.
Yes.
So I think
and very musical too. And
Yeah,
that's
and he
the
was-
other thing. And he was a musician. And
Yeah.
and they're all about getting you up there and playing.
Yeah.
Like it's so that was probably
something he really liked about it as well.
Right,
It was an
right.
opportunity for him to perform. And he actually met people there at church that he
Right.
kind of like became close with, like seemingly genuinely close with, They like hired him to do a kid's birthday party, so he got to perform at a kid's birthday party. Apparently he like wanted people to be taking him more seriously or
Right.
whatever, this fucking guy. So yes, I think he genuinely wanted to go and be a part of the church, but I do think there was a little bit underneath of like, hey, this way I'm not a loner, like, so I'm
Right.
not going to stick out. I'm going to have people that they kind of have to be my friend, kind of thing.
Right. It's like a surrogate family in a way that he obviously wasn't getting with his real family.
Exactly. And he actually met a woman at church named O'Mather Halco. Kind of a cool name, O'Mather. You're in the South when your first name is just fully a last name.
Yeah. O'Mather is, yeah.
Just fully is a last name. And that's the South for you, baby. And I'm into it. But so they got married, and you're not going to believe this, but Danny was abusive.
No.
Yeah, I know. It's literally shocking.
My goodness.
So the marriage didn't last long, not just because he was abusive, but also because they couldn't really have a sexual relationship with each other because Danny's sexual fantasies were now becoming darker and darker and darker.
Right.
And of course, she's just probably like your run-of-the-mill just sex just sex, Just nothing crazy. Just give her a freaking break.
Yeah.
And also he was just, as we said before, incredibly emotionally immature, and he could not hold down a job. Now, as he was married to O'Mather, he continued to peep on other women and continued to be caught for it, and he just would refuse to really take responsibility for what he was doing. And eventually, when he was served with divorce papers, he decided that he wanted to kill himself. So he went out into the forest with a gun, and he was going to kill himself, and he just couldn't go through with it. So he basically decided to just go out and just go on this big fucking spree, just robbing banks, do an armed robbery spree, basically.
Right.
And because of all of the negative experiences he had had with his father as a police officer and all of the other police officers in town, because they were all friends with his dad and would also be really mean to him and things like that, he wanted to kind of fuck over the police officers too and his father.
Right.
And he was like, kind of thought maybe his dad could just shoot him and kill him.
Right.
Then this is one of the first things that is kind of a lot. This is just like a 10-second thing. Then he broke into someone's house and he raped a woman who looked just like O'Mather out of fury and anger, basically. Then he continued on and he would go on like I said before, this like huge armed robbery spree, which eventually led to him being incarcerated in Georgia in 1979. And he was in jail kind of off and on throughout the 80s. He really thought whenever he would do these armed robberies, he continually would apologize as he was doing the robbery to the people and asking them to pray for him. It's just crazy.
It's weird.
He
weird.
genuinely thinks that kind of balances out the sheet. That makes it okay. It's like,
Right.
what in the actual fuck?
It's as if it's on the level of saying, I'm sorry, can I bother you for just like a water? Or
Yes.
like you're asking for, I just need something to drink. Can I bother you for a,
Yeah.
guys, I'm so sorry I gotta do this. I gotta rob you.
Yeah.
Oh, shucks.
And that just shows that he is just like a total adrenaline junkie. He just gets off on that feeling on
Right.
like if he's going to be caught, what's going to happen. That high that he must be getting from committing these crimes, from sexual assault all the way to armed robbery and everything in between.
Yeah.
So as I said, he was in jail at this time, and he actually tried to escape at one point, and one of the guards attacked him because he knew Taekwondo, and he actually tore one of Danny Rowling's testicles.
Kicked him in the balls so hard.
Yeah.
He tore one of Danny Rowling's testicles.
And I guess that was like a permanent injury.
I like to think that, like, because obviously Danny Rowling hasn't, for all the despicable things he's done, he hasn't yet become the true monster,
right.
you know, that we know him as. I wonder if that security guy later in life was like, I'm the guy who kicked Danny Rowling in the nuts. You know what I mean?
I would be proud of that.
Put that old Taekwondo to use.
Oh, exactly. Yes. I would be proud as hell. I would tell everyone I know. As soon as I meet them, I'd say, I tore someone's fucking testicles.
You know what I love, though, is that means that security guard was telling everyone he knows Taekwondo.
Oh, yeah.
He must have just been telling everyone he knows Taekwondo.
I know. I think that was also probably he just really wanted everyone to know he knew Taekwondo. It's kind of, I think it's cool as hell.
This guy was clearly the Dwight Schrute of the prison guards.
Yeah, big time. So Danny was released from prison in 1984, and once he was released from prison, he moved back home, and he would dress up like straight up Rambo with a log over his shoulders, sometimes like military fatigues on, and like run around the town.
Before we dive into that, Jim.
Yeah, Jesus.
He keeps moving back home. One,
I know.
Why did his parents let him if they hate him so much?
I know, it's very toxic.
It's fucking like Harry and the Dursleys. Why does he keep fucking going back? But anyway.
But speaking of fucked up, here we go. So yeah, this motherfucker would like run around like fucking Rambo, like totally delusional. This man was barely in the Air Force and he's acting like he was a Green Beret, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
It's just so over the top and so insane.
It almost sounds like the origin of like someone who went on to become a country star, but wasn't a piece of shit. Like it's kind of like Johnny Cash had a dad who was a bastard.
Right.
Treated him like shit, grew up poor, goes out, even was in the military briefly.
Right.
Like it literally does sound like the origin story of like a country star.
And that's probably what he like was telling himself.
I'm sure he was.
He was like, oh, I got this. I got the story. I got the background.
Well, and you're going to hear him sing later.
Oh, that's right. You are going to hear him sing later. Fuck.
But we're saving that Easter egg.
Oh, come on. During this time, he was still committing crimes. He was still stealing, and he was still sexually assaulting people. But it wasn't until a little bit later when he went on a full-on other crime spree, and then he was actually sentenced to 15 years, but only served 3 when then he was paroled. And what did he do, Dylan? He moved back home.
What a dumbass.
I know.
So he got, was it good behavior or something?
I don't really know why he got paroled. It seems like this man should not have been eligible for parole.
Did people not find out he had committed that rape until after, like years later, after everything came to light? Or like, did he ever serve for this?
Yeah, I don't think they knew that was him until much later. So in November of 1989, Danny is working at this restaurant, this buffet, and he gets fired from the buffet. And for some goddamn reason, that's the last straw on the camel's back. I don't know why that job, out of all of the jobs he has lost, I think maybe he felt bad about himself because he couldn't handle serving at a buffet.
Oh, that's right. It was a buffet. It was a Mexican buffet, right? Like a Mexican food buffet?
Which is rough. I used to work at a buffet. It was a very classy buffet, though. And yeah, even at a really classy buffet, I can tell you, it wasn't hard.
In my brain, classy and buffet is like an oxymoron.
I know. They made it work.
I'm interested to see what a classy buffet is.
Yeah. So Danny Rowling really just snapped. Prior to that, Danny Rowling had really expounded on one of his hobbies. Now he wasn't just peeping on women, he was now peeping on whole families.
Which is so strange because with peeping, there's a sexual connotation with it.
Right.
But if he's peeping on whole family, I mean, I guess he could still, be getting his jollies, but like at the same time, now it's almost like he's like longing to be in a family.
Right.
Like that's like something you see in a movie.
Like silently watching a family just have have like a normal, healthy, balanced life.
Right.
I could see it being kind of both, honestly. And maybe they're kind of connected and maybe they're a little bit separate and maybe they're all of that at the same time. Maybe he enjoys knowing that he's watching someone without them knowing that they're being watched. And maybe that is just exciting to him. But also, I do think you're right that there is something there about this being a functioning family. And that's something that he like has never experienced and doesn't really even, I'm sure doesn't even really understand.
Right.
Especially with like how his brain is. You know, we'll talk more about this as it goes on, but later in our story, Danny Rowling will be evaluated by a psychologist, and they say that, you know, his emotional intelligence was really at somewhere around an 8 or 9 year old.
Right.
So in early November, Danny Rowling had been camping out in the field behind the Grissom's house. And one day, after he was fired from this buffet job, he came in dressed kind of Rambo-ish and burst into the door and duct taped and handcuffed all 3 of the people. The people in the house were 24-year-old Julie Grissom, her nephew, 8-year-old Sean Grissom, and her dad, 55-year-old Tom Grissom. First, he took Tom, the father or grandfather of the family, and took him into the back and stabbed and killed him. Then he came back into the room and quickly stabbed and killed the 8-year-old Sean. Then he took Julie Grissom to a bathroom, sexually assaulted her, and then stabbed her to death. He then washed her vagina with vinegar to clean out any sort of bodily fluids that he may have left behind. He then did a load of laundry, removed all of the duct tape from the bodies, and then posed Julie's body on the bed with her hair fanned out and her legs spread on the bed.
And something you'll find out, he has no problem spending time with the body afterward.
No.
He doesn't cover it. He doesn't try to, like, he has no problem just hanging out with a corpse.
Yeah, it is so chilling. So after this happened, the police really had no idea who could have possibly done this. They really didn't have any leads, and they for sure did not think that it was Danny Rowling. Not long after that, though, Danny got into a car accident where he suffered another major head injury.
Jesus.
It wasn't long after this that he got in this huge fight with his father, and he actually shot his father. Somehow his dad did not die. He got shot like between the eyes.
Right, he got shot twice, I think. Once between the eyes and once somewhere else.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah.
It must have been a low caliber handgun.
Right. He sustained lifelong injuries. I think he was blind in one eye as well as other things as well. But still, the fact that he got shot in the head and survived is crazy. After he shot his father, he kind of went out on the run. He still was out there doing different robberies at different grocery stores and banks and places like that. And after he left one grocery store, after he had robbed it, he said, "Thank you. God bless. Please pray for me. I need it."
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, okay.
Okay, guy.
I guess that makes it okay that you just
Fuck off.
You just robbed this place at gunpoint.
What a hokey piece of shit.
Serious, yeah, so hokey. For real. As Danny was on the run, he went to Sarasota, and while he was there, he recorded into a tape recorder what he was about to do and apologized to his family, saying that this is what he was destined to do and he needed to do what he was about to do. And then he sang all his songs. He had a bunch of different songs and he sang them all.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But what's most important is that he recorded what he was going to do and apologized to his family for what he was going to put them through and that he was going to do such a thing. And after he did that, he actually drove to Tallahassee because he was a big Ted Bundy fan.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to say, a fan, you know. But he actually was a fan. He wasn't just like fascinated with him. He was like an actual fan.
Jesus God.
And because Ted Bundy was active in Tallahassee, he thought that that would be a good idea for him to do as well. But for kind of unknown reasons, he decided to go to Gainesville, where the University of Florida is, rather than Florida State University in Tallahassee. So Danny arrived in Gainesville right before the beginning of the fall semester at the University of Florida. So University of Florida is a very well-regarded school. It's also known as a party school, known to have a lot of fun, young, cool, very football-centric school.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just kind of your, like, college. And right by it was, when you were a little bit off campus, was just, like, these thick woods. You could go in there and you kind of could feel like you weren't really by anything. And that is where Danny Rowling kind of set up shop. Sonia, Larsen, and Christy Powell were both students or were incoming freshmen at the University of Florida. They both were very, very sweet young women who were just very, very excited to be going to University of Florida, especially Christy. She was like Gator everything. She had this beautiful gold necklace that was a Florida Gators necklace that she never took it off. She was just so happy to be going to school.
And her
there.
family was so proud, so proud.
Oh.
I mean, it is a good school. Like, just because it's a party school, it's also a good school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very well-regarded research university.
Yeah.
And it's really a great place to go to school. So she was really excited to go there, and they were both these incoming freshmen, but there were so many incoming freshmen that not everyone could live on campus. The two of them looked so hard to find on-campus housing, and Sonia's mom was actually really uncomfortable with the idea of her daughter living off campus her first year, and, you know, was really worried about her daughter's safety, but there's really nothing else that they could do. There was no room. Now, keep in mind what I'm about to describe happened the first night they arrived at school. In the middle of the night, as Sonia and Christy were sleeping, Danny used a screwdriver to break into their off-campus apartment. He walked in and he saw Sonia sleeping on the couch and stood there and watched her sleep for 10 minutes.
He literally just stood for 10 minutes and watched her fucking sleep.
Watched her sleep for 10 minutes. This man was in the house. Then he goes over to one of the bedrooms and he sees Christy sleeping and proceeds to stand there and watch her sleep for 5 more minutes. Now here's the part where it's going to get pretty graphic.
Yes.
So if you're squeamish or if you're unsure about this part, fast forward just about 20-30 seconds. Then Danny went back into the living room and stabbed Sonia and then immediately placed duct tape over her mouth. And he stabbed her again and she bled out within about 1 minute. However, Christy Powell woke up with duct tape being put on top of her mouth. She was then raped and then stabbed to death. Then her breasts were cut off of her body and wrapped in plastic and placed next to the body. He then posed the body face up so that whoever came in, probably a police officer, and discovered the body would notice that her breasts had been cut off right away. He also fanned out her hair and spread her legs so that they were hanging over the edge of the bed. He then took a nap, a shower, and then left while singing a hymn. And the whole time that he was inside of the house, apparently he was playing Faith by George Michael the entire time.
Like, while killing them.
Yes. I mean, like an actual movie. I mean, so absolutely horrifying.
What a bat shit. And of all songs.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely horrifying. Now, the next day, a family member of Sonia's, I believe, was coming by to drop off some furniture for them. They knocked on the door and there wasn't any answer, and they saw notes left on the door from their friends, letting them know that, hey, they went out or they must have missed you. They immediately knew something was strange. So Christy Powell's parents lived not too far away, so they came over and they knocked on the door and there was no answer. They eventually convinced a maintenance worker to open the door for them, but the maintenance worker wouldn't go in unless a police officer was there as well. So a police officer came to the apartment complex and the police officer and the maintenance worker went into the apartment. Not long after they entered the apartment, the maintenance worker came running out screaming, oh God," and started throwing up. Unfortunately, this was right in front of the Powells, and they knew right away that something absolutely horrible had happened. When they searched the apartment, they saw that the perpetrator, Danny, they didn't know that yet though,
Right.
had used dish soap to try to cover up the scene and clean up the scene, and also took the duct tape with him when he left, which let police officers know that this person had some kind of awareness and understanding of police work and what they might be looking for and what they would take from a crime scene.
And we saw that in what he did in Shreveport
Yes.
with using the vinegar.
Yes. He also took the duct tape from
Right.
the people in Shreveport as well. It was only 8 hours after this that Krista Hoyt's body was found. Krista Hoyt was a student at Santa Fe Community College, and she really wanted to be a police officer. She had been working towards that goal for a long time, and she was another just really bright, lovely person that people really liked to spend time with, and was just an all-around good
Right.
person. One day, she just didn't show up for work at the sheriff's office, and everyone there knew that something was not right. This wasn't like her. She wouldn't just not show up to work without saying anything, so they knew right away that they needed to go send some officers out to her house to check on her.
Right.
Now, this killing was another killing that is absolutely disgusting and so repulsive. Here is another warning for
Yes.
what I'm going to describe happened. Feel free to fast forward about 20 or 30 seconds.
This is probably the worst one yet.
Yes.
And it's just utterly despicable. Word of warning.
Yes. Once again, late at night, Danny Rowling used a screwdriver to break into Krista Hoyt's house. Her apartment, I should say. He finds her, duct tapes her mouth closed, and sexually assaults her multiple times. Then he stabs her to death and really has multiple stab wounds all over her body. Her breasts were cut off here as well, and they were wrapped in towels, presumably for Danny to take with him. And not only that, but Danny then decided to actually decapitate her after she died and place her head up on a shelf so it appeared like her head was staring at her own body, which was staged to be sitting upright on the edge of the bed.
Think about that. Her body, it was sitting upright. Her headless body was sitting upright. I know I'm just reiterating what you're saying, but
it's-
literally,
yeah.
it's such a, with the head on a shelf looking at the body.
Yeah. And he even set up a mirror to make sure, no matter what, that the person who came in first, presumably a police officer, and he knew that, would see this horrific image, this head staring at the body as soon as they walked in, and there's no way that they could miss it. 2 police officers went. Keep in mind, these police officers know who Krista is, and they like Krista. She is a friend of theirs. They were able to gain access into the house. One of the police officers saw her and said to the other one that you don't want to see this. So the police officer did not look to see what Krista Hoyt looked like at that point. At this point, there is absolute terror on the campus at the University of Florida. People were going home, people were sleeping in huge groups together. A student named Stacy Green, who was 19 years old, said, "We slept with steak knives last night. I need to call my mom. This is unreal." Nearly 50 students had applied for concealed carry weapon permits in just a couple of days. People were moving into frats that they were not in. People were sleeping 10 people to a room and sleeping in shifts. People were really freaking out about this. This was like really a scary thing.
Well, especially I would imagine if you're a student and if you're not living on campus.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's one thing if you're in a crowded dorm, which is already,
Which
they
has
were saying,
security and,
right. And even then, a lot of them, they said like a lot of the dorms were just clearing out.
Yeah, that
people
were
were
just
going
empty.
home.
Yeah.
But imagine living, off campus alone or with a roommate in your
Right.
apartment, and if
Oh.
your fucking apartment's right by the woods.
Well, right by the woods, yeah. And if you're a woman, you're especially scared. Especially, these were all shorter, kind of brunette women. Like, of course you're going to be scared.
Right.
After the murder of Krista Hoyt, Danny Rowling continues on to rob a bank. And as he's robbing a bank, one of the bank tellers was smart enough to throw in one of those dye pack things that explodes when it gets touched or whatever.
Stains the bills.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't use it. And also, it's just a good way to notice if someone robbed a goddamn bank.
Right.
So the police followed and used eyewitness accounts to go into the woods to find out where this this person, once again, they didn't know it was Danny Rowling, where this person had robbed the bank it went to. So they go into the woods and they find Danny's campsite in the woods. They find a gun, they find a screwdriver, they find the money, the dyed money, and they find a tape recorder. And they don't connect it with the murders at all.
Right.
They think it's just a completely different thing. So much so that they don't even listen to what is on that tape recorder.
This could have ended so much earlier.
Yes, it makes you fucking furious. I mean, it's like just the incompetence, the laziness. Like, that's all that it is. I'm sorry, like, that's what it is.
Like, how the fuck does that would be like if you're a detective stumbling into a murder scene and you find a note.
Yeah.
And then you just don't ever read it.
You just say, I don't think I really need to read the note. And listen, I understand that a lot of this tape was him singing shitty songs. However, a lot of the tape was him saying exactly what he was going to do and saying his full name.
Yeah.
Like, hello?
Yeah.
So they don't know that at all. So they just kind of bag it up as evidence and put it away in a warehouse somewhere and don't really think twice about it. And it is because of this that Danny Rowling then has the opportunity to go after Tracy Paulus and Manny Taboda. Manny was going to be an architecture major, and he was a football player at his high school. He also was an actor in the drama club in high school. It seems like he was just an all-around great guy.
Yeah.
Him and Tracy were just friends. A lot of people apparently thought they were dating,
Right.
but I guess they really were just friends.
He was a good-looking guy.
A great-looking guy, and so was Tracy. All of these people are very, very attractive.
Yeah.
Which I think was on purpose.
I'm sure, yeah. And he also, this guy, Manny, he was like, he was an athlete. He was in good shape, too. He was a buff dude.
Tall, guy. So very different than the profile of who have been the victims so far.
Right.
And Tracy also was incredibly close with her friends and her sister and seemed like she was just such a compassionate, warm person who really had a super bright future ahead of her. Tracy had just moved in that weekend, and a friend of hers called her that day to say that she had heard about all of these things that were going on, all of these murders that were happening, and that Tracy needs to be careful. And Tracy was like, oh, I don't even know. Tracy might have not even had heard yet. So she was just like, oh, that's so crazy. Of course I'll be careful. And that night, she was killed by the Gainesville Ripper. Once again, it was the middle of the night when Danny broke in using a screwdriver to get in through the sliding glass door. Now, he knew that he had to kill Manny first because if Manny heard anything going on, he would run to try to help Tracy, and then he would have to fight off both of them.
Right.
So he snuck in and stabbed Manny right away as he was sleeping. But Manny put up one fucking hell of a fight, and it took him being stabbed 32 times to die.
They said there was even a moment when Manny had he got him in a bear hug. He had got Danny in a bear hug.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for his blood loss, he would have probably had him there. He had a good, but because of his blood loss, he
just couldn't
hold that grip.
So it's just so terrible. So he then proceeds to go to Tracy's room, and just a quick heads up, you might want to fast forward 20 seconds. He then stabs her and repeatedly sexually assaults her. And even before that began, she said, you're something along the lines of like, you're the person, aren't you?
You're him or
you're
something.
him, aren't you? And he said, yes, I am him. So sad. So he sexually assaulted her and killed her, and she died from blood loss from being stabbed as well. So now at this point, Danny Rowling has killed Julie Grissom, Sean Grissom, Tom Grissom, Sonia Larsen, Christina Powell, Krista Hoyt, Manny Taboda, and Tracy Paulus.
Is that 8 people?
Yes, absolutely crazy. And so that's what makes him a serial killer rather than a spree killer, because the 5 in Gainesville, they all were within one period of time without a cooldown period. However, there was a long cooldown period between killing the Grissoms and killing the people in Gainesville. So at this point, the media is going absolutely fucking insane about this whole story. And I mean, rightfully so. I understand this is a huge story.
Yeah.
However, the media really kind of got way in the way of what was going on.
They flooded this town.
They flooded this town, and they really just harassed all of these people. Krista Hoyt's family found out about all of the terrible things that happened to her from the newspaper.
Right, from the press leaks.
Yes.
Someone would leak something something to the press. And so these awful details they would find out in the press.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And not only that, but a lot of tips started to come in about someone named Edward Humphries. Edward Humphries was a freshman at the University of Florida, and a lot of people found him to be very, very strange. To be fair, he did have these scars on his face, like they really looked kind of like the Joker type scars on his face.
And what was it? It was a car accident?
He had gotten into like a major car accident before.
It was literally, if you were going to put scars on a fictional villain in a movie or a comic book, that's literally what happened to this guy.
Yes.
He got these scars that literally made him look like a villain.
Oh, absolutely, fully. And he also had bipolar disorder, but he was off of his medication, so he was going through a manic episode at this time. So he really wasn't being himself, and he was talking about very strange things. And unfortunately, he did physically assault. He did punch his grandmother in the face. And because of this assault on his grandmother, he was placed in jail under $1 million bond.
Yeah. Because they were convinced it was him.
Yes, they were convinced that it was him that had done the murders. They didn't have enough evidence to be able to hold him or to be able to arrest him for the murders, but they had him on the assault charges, so they set that bond way high. I mean, higher than they knew he would ever be able to get.
Yeah.
And, you know, speaking of the press, as I was before, they were harassing this woman, this Edward Humphries' grandmother, to the point where she opened the door one time to tell them off, to tell all these reporters off, and she had a heart attack and died.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's like, you guys literally made this woman so upset while she's going through hell right now that she died. It's absolutely insane. However, this was the early 90s. This was 1990, and there was some DNA analysis that was available at the time. They were able to test some bodily fluids that were left at the crime scenes, and they were able to see that the perpetrator had type B blood, whereas Edward had type A blood.
That's right. They said it was because Danny Rowling was what they call a secretor.
Yes.
Which I guess it's not everyone is like this, but I guess somehow, with a regular person, say you had a sperm sample, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell their blood type.
Right.
Or if their saliva, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell their blood type. Whereas I guess with Danny Rowling, he's a secretor, and I guess somehow you're able to tell.
Right.
Through
it
how
just secretes into your other fucking shit.
Right.
I don't really know.
Obviously, we don't know the science behind it, but I guess in layman's terms, I guess that's what it means.
Right. So they're like, fuck, this isn't him. However, when they arrested him for the assault, all of the murders stopped. So people were like, oh, okay, it definitely is him.
Right. And this poor kid looks like the Joker. He looks like the Joker. He looks like a villain. And then I'm sure when people find out he punched his grandma,
right, they're like, oh, it's got to be him. And apparently he, had some like magazines about like knives, and he had porn, and he had magazines about guns and things like that. So people were like, oh, it's definitely him. It's definitely him. And it's just like such a terrible thing. And, he was going all of this time without his medication, and he was being interrogated for 24 hours straight. This man and going through a manic episode when he really needed medical care. They were taking advantage of him. They knew that the perpetrator wasn't Edward Humphries, but they still didn't know who the perpetrator was.
Right.
Through this like database that they had at the time, they were able to connect that there were a lot of similarities between these murders and some murders that had happened in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Right.
So they were able to see, there's so many connections between how these bodies were displayed and things like that between all of these different murders. So when they found Julie Grissom's body in Shreveport, they saw that there was a bite on her left breast. They were able to take a sample of the bite mark with the saliva, and they were able to tell the blood type, and the blood type was also type B blood, just like the perpetrator in the murders in Gainesville. So this was another thing that's really made them feel like, okay, there's a really good chance that this is the same person doing both of them.
Right.
However, they really don't know who this person could be until this fucking queen Cindy Dobbin comes into the picture. She was on vacation in Florida, and while she was in Florida, she just turned on the news and she saw these Gainesville murders.
Right.
And she remembered that she and her husband had heard Danny Rowling say some really, really strange things. She said she remembered that he said that he wanted to go where the girls are beautiful. And he also said that he liked sticking knives in people. They knew each other from church, by the way.
Okay.
I don't even know what to say about that, but this was some church conversation, apparently.
Yeah.
So Cindy Dobbin picked up the phone and called Crime Stopper and said, "You need to check out Danny Rowling." And they're like, "Damn, we do." Then they get in touch with Danny Rowling's dentist. They're like, "Hey, do you have a tooth of his?" And he's like, "I actually do." Why he has a tooth, I don't know.
Yeah,
But he still has a tooth. That does kind of freak me out. Does my dentist just have a bunch of my teeth?
Right.
I hope not, but maybe he does.
Who knows?
It's hard to know. Now I hope he does to make sure. I don't know, maybe it's necessary for some reason. I don't know. But anyway, through the DNA analysis they were able to do on the tooth, they were able to see that this was indeed Danny Rowling who committed the murders in Shreveport as well as Gainesville. So, good news for the police. Danny Rowling was already in jail for this dumb fucking heist he was trying to pull. Police charge him with the murders of the people in Gainesville. He pleads not guilty and is sent to Florida State Penitentiary to wait his trial. And there is where he met a man named Bobby Lewis. Bobby Lewis was a murderer in Florida who was one of the only people to ever, or maybe the only person to escape death row in Florida. So Bobby Lewis had a cell right by Danny Rowling. And Danny Rowling kind of started to confess to the murders through Bobby Lewis.
Okay.
And so Bobby Lewis then would pass it on to the authorities. And it was true that Danny Rowling had information that only the killer would know. That was not public information or anything like that. So the police were starting to believe him. However, this wasn't really a full confession because it was like through a third party and it's just like very weird. So they had to kind of jump through some hoops, but eventually they got that confession. Not only that, but Bobby Lewis introduces Danny to a woman by the name of Sandra London. This woman is like literally wants to get with serial killers.
Yes.
Just a media attention hog, media queen is what she feels.
Yes.
And so I guess,
but
she whatever.
proclaims to be a journalist. Like,
Yes.
she doesn't just straight up be like, "I love them." She'll be like, "I need to learn their story." Like, you're right. Kind of like they're almost like a Nancy Grace, you said.
Yeah.
She comes off like, "I need to get their true story."
Like, I'm doing this for a noble thing that I'm doing, when really it's like she's just taking advantage of these horrible situations and kind of not necessarily taking the side of the serial killer, but like going along with the serial killer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So it's very bizarre. So
Very fucking bizarre.
they actually eventually fall in love and get engaged.
That's right.
It is the most bizarre shit. We will go more into this. We're going to do a killer groupies episode.
Yes.
So we're going to kind of dive deeper into that aspect of this story with that episode and with
we'll
her.
save some of the goodness because she is a rich bucket of just stuff. We will save her.
So they actually even wrote a book together kind of expressing of what Danny Rowling said really happened, kind of coming from his own mouth.
Right.
I haven't read it. It seems like a little much for me.
He tried
personally.
to pass it off as supernatural.
Yes.
That he
Of course. I didn't even say that part. Yes. That's right. Of course. Danny said he kind of had mentioned this before, but he really, really leaned into it with Sandra, that there was a demon named Gemini that was coming forward from him.
Right. And committing these acts while possessing him. There was two personalities besides himself. There was Gemini, which was the baddest one, but then there was also Enid, which is Enad or something, which is Danny backwards.
Jesus Christ.
And he would say these personalities would take control and commit these acts.
Yes. And he did say that from a younger age, that he did feel like he had multiple personalities as a way to kind of cope with what was going on in his life. And he did say that when he watched The Exorcist 3, and the demon in that story is named Gemini, and Danny himself is a Gemini, he saw that as a sign or a synchronicity or something like that. that
Right.
it was time to go forward with the plan.
Yeah.
This is not true. Danny was already in Gainesville. He was already planning on doing this.
Yes.
It just happened. This was just
Yeah.
a coincidence. But they really leaned into that, the fact that it was a demon that did this to him. He said that Gemini left him as he was killing the final person, which was Tracy. That's why he didn't mutilate her body after she had passed.
Oh, God. And
Which is like, oh my God.
yeah.
What in the fucking, like, this is so, it's like, do you think we're all stupid? Like, you
Yeah.
are a child.
Yeah.
You are a full-blown child.
And then the shit they write in the book is absolutely bad shit.
Oh yeah, it's like, I'm not gonna read it. I can't really like be a part of that shit, but if anyone out there reads it, please let us know, because I'm curious. Let us know at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com, because we want to hear all about that craziness. But Sandra and Danny really had only been able to communicate with each other through a thick pane of glass.
That's right.
Until one day, they were able to be together for the first time in a courtroom.
Oh, yeah. And
Danny decided to take this time to really express himself
yeah.
to Sandra. And I think we'd like to play that for you now.
Rules say I have to give Mr. Rowling an opportunity to have a say. You have anything you want to say, Mr. Rowling?
Well, sir. If it please the court, could I address the court?
Sure, say whatever you want to say.
Thank you. And, I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you, but it was hard to say. I couldn't touch you. So tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together.
Excuse me, Mr. Rowling.
Down the
Mr.
path
Rowling.
you choose
Mr. Rowling.
to follow.
Mr. Rowling.
Tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together. What were my words? All my tears run together, baby, just like rain.
One song and that's it.
One song. You get one
You get
song.
one. You get one. Now, eventually Danny pleads guilty, but he still has to go through the whole trial so that the jury can decide if he gets the death penalty or not.
That's right. Everyone expected him to say not guilty, because that's
Right.
what he had done this whole time.
Initially had said yes.
Not guilty, right. And so...
I think Sandra convinced him to switch to guilty, I believe. And it didn't take long for the jury to decide that he was guilty of first-degree murder of all of these 5 people, and that he was sentenced to death. Now, he never was actually tried for the murders that he committed in Shreveport. However, they do feel like justice has been served at the same time, even though they never were able to get their full trial. It is public knowledge that he did commit these crimes,
Right.
and he even confessed to committing those crimes right before he was executed.
Right.
On October 25th, 2006, Danny Rowling was executed in the Florida State Prison. In his final moments, there was 47 people in the witness area of the execution room, and when they asked if he had any last words, he sang a religious hymn that goes, "None greater than thee, O Lord, none greater than thee." They eventually cut off his microphone, and he was given a lethal injection and slowly died. Finally, I think these families were able to get some kind of closure on this horrible, horrible chapter.
Horrible.
And hopefully they were able to finally begin to find some kind of healing or be able to live their lives after this terrible, terrible thing. And this story was so crazy, was so incendiary, that it was actually the main inspiration for the movie Scream.
Yeah. Horrible, horrible event, and one of the darkest, nastiest things we've ever covered.
Oh my God. Please, everyone, go watch a light movie, a light comedy, something that you don't have to pay attention to. Rewatch something you've watched a million times. Drink some water. We love ya. That was a tough one.
Well, I know what always cheers me up.
What?
Reading the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers.
Fuck, that's such a good idea.
Of course, the Dream, James Watkins, the Finnish Face via a Lungfist, the Madman, Mark Marcus Hall, the vivacious Vicky McHugh, the tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the heartbreak kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British bone breaker Bex Martin, the notorious Nicholas Barker, the terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the loathsome Johnny Love, and the carnivorous Kevin Bogey.
Thank you for listing off those names, Dylan.
Yes, of course. Maureen, thank you for enduring that research.
Woo.
That was not pleasant, and
My pleasure, though.
thank you for doing all that.
Of course.
If you like this show and want to support it, go to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. And also like, rate, subscribe,
Yes.
tell your friends, tell your family, evangelize
Yes.
the great name of Creep
We
Street.
so appreciate all that you do for us. It really means the world to us.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Bye.